So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's good to see you all again for our February Facebook Live. If you can say hi in the comments, drop where you're tuning in from. We would love to kind of know where everyone is located today because I am in the US. But my friends Catherine and John are both here from the UK today. So we're around the world for this Facebook Live, and we're really excited to chat with them today. Just a few things to start with. As always, this Facebook Live is being recorded and will be available on our Facebook page and our YouTube pages after this event has finished. If you are unable to join us live and you're watching later but still have comments or questions, please leave those in the comment section below, and we will either answer them in the next few days, or I can email them over to Catherine and John if there's something that I can't answer for them or for you. But again, thank you for joining us today. I'm very excited to have Catherine and John, the owners of Refocus, with us today. Refocus is a UK-based coaching organization that focuses on individuals with cognitive differences, including NVLD, and they are one of our newest partners for the NVLD project. So very excited to welcome them today. I am going to turn it over to each of them to give their own introductions because who better to tell their story than themselves? So we'll start with Catherine, if that's okay.
Sure. Hi, good evening or good afternoon, everybody. Hi. Um, we're very excited to be partnering with the NVLD project, and particularly me, because the reason we started this company was I grew up in South Africa and always thought myself to be stupid. And as I finished school, I moved to England thinking I was too stupid to go to university. Came over here, this was 40 odd years ago. And I never really knew what was wrong with me. But I could always talk the talk. I got by and 20 or so years later, but there was always a feeling of less than, to the point actually where I didn't want to have children because I didn't want to bring stupid people into the world. And it also just it seemed such a big step to be able to have a family and a career and relationships, and it was just all too much. But I wasn't in the gutter or anything. I had a very pedestrian job working for a misogynist, and um, and I lived a fairly interesting, very interesting life in London, but quite lonely. And about 10 or so years ago, I re-met my stepsister, who was by this stage a psychologist in New Zealand. And she suggested to me that I get tested, the WAIS 5 testing. And I did this. And once it was done, she said, "You're actually not stupid. You have NVLD." And she described it as a great big gap between my verbal and nonverbal skills. And so we colloquially called it the gap because every time, and it became a bit of a verb, oh, you're gapping again, when I second guessed somebody or when I didn't get something, which is probably averaging at the moment at about 5 times a day. But I went to New Zealand to go and learn about it, came back to England and said, "I've got NVLD." And everybody said, "What?" And nobody had heard of it. It was literally just, uh, it had not, and when you Googled it, there was a little bit, obviously your website, but it was certainly not in any way, there was no information available. At the same time, I also got diagnosed with ADHD, and which I do have as well, but I would think that my NVLD I think is probably 70-30 in favor of NVLD, as far as citing neurodivergence is concerned. And with that, it kind of gave a public face to my challenges. And I went and at that point, actually, it was at the point of being diagnosed with NVLD, I knew that I wanted to help people not get to 50 and have no confidence, which is effectively what happened to me. So I trained as a coach, and with an educational psychologist, set up Refocus. And John joined a couple of years later. And it is largely still seen as a ADHD coaching. I mean, we do autism or high functioning autism, but I don't know how many of you out there are from the UK, and I think world over, ADHD is very much the kind of condition du jour, and it's, you cannot open a newspaper without and people talking about my ADHD, which I'm not dissing ADHD. I have it, and the ADHD meds work really well for me, and all of that. However, there's a lot more to it. It's not, and I think when you see, we're seeing more and more people now with NVLD as well as ADHD, and a couple with no ADHD actually. So last year we went to New York and came and went and met Laura and Paula. And it was just unbelievably exciting to actually kind of go to the HQ of what is going on in my head, has been going on in my head for 59 years. So it's just fantastic to be able to, first of all, know that there is this great drive for the DSM and everything, but also our quest and our absolute crusade now is to bring it to the UK and to be able for psychologists, neuropsychologists, even occupational therapists, psychiatrists to diagnose it when it comes onto the DSM, and then also to be able to, for us to be able to coach people in it, which we are already doing because of using screenings, and we can kind of see when people just present with challenges, or, but it is a huge crusade and it's very personal to me. So that's me in a nutshell, but I'll answer any question.
Thank you, Catherine. John, you want to do an introduction as well?
Sure, yes. I had a very different route to Catherine's. I started off as an investment banker, then I was in the television business for about 20 years, and then I had my own kind of telecoms company for a bit. Then about 10 years ago, I trained as an executive coach. And it became clear to me that there are a million executive coaches, but almost none of them know anything about neurodivergence. And it was a very kind of happy meeting with our sort of career paths with Catherine, because she had set up this ADHD or coaching business to begin with, and she sent me some of her clients, and I started to see more and more people with ADHD and do executive coaching for ADHD, and I trained in it. I started to learn a lot more about it, expanded it into other forms of neurodivergence, and then now 95% of my clients are neurodivergent, and we have expanded also into advising companies on how to get the best from their neurodivergent employees in terms of how to treat them at work, what accommodations to give them, the recruitment processes that they should follow, and really to convince the kind of corporate body that neurodivergence is an asset. It's potentially a huge unexploited resource that many companies are just ignoring, or at worst, kind of willfully refusing people that show any signs of neurodivergence, or kind of blocking their applications, or just not considering them in the first place. So that, and as Catherine said, it has become, it's a personal thing. It's something we really care about, and we think it's very important. So yeah, so about, as Catherine said, a few years ago, I joined Refocus, and we now run the company together and do a mixture of individual coaching, group coaching. We do workshops on various aspects of neurodivergence and self-compassion and how to deal with the various challenges that come up. And we do this corporate advisory work as well.
Amazing. Let's kind of from there start with NVLD in the UK. And I know when we chatted before we came on live, we talked about it. It's a very short conversation. And as Catherine mentioned, it's kind of unheard of and unknown. You had to go to New Zealand to get information and a diagnosis. So talk to me about, because most of our audience is here in the US, but we do have a UK audience. And last month we talked about our DSM proposal, but talk to me a little bit about NVLD in the UK and Europe. Do people know about it? Can they get services? Are there therapists to help, or are you guys it?
Shall I start and you can talk about
Sure.
John? I think John is going to be able to talk about Europe because, well, sadly we are not Europe anymore, but that sensitive subject, but actually, and there is a difference. I mean, EU and NVLD wise. So when before we came to New York last year, I spent a good afternoon or a long time trawling around neuropsychologists, psychiatrists, trying to get somebody here to looking for a diagnosis. I just wanted to know, does it exist? Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but I haven't been able to find one. I haven't found anybody who is, and I would think that the NVLD project would know because it does seem to be the kind of HQ and also going to the Prudence and everybody who doing the DSM work. So I haven't found anything. However, we have produced a bit of a kind of teaser program, and we've shown it to friends of ours, business friends of ours in mental health, and some of whom have actually, or they had heard of it. Some have just but didn't know what it was, and obviously because it's got this weird name that doesn't really explain what it is, so that doesn't help. So we're still looking for people, but we haven't found anybody yet. But we have started to make inroads into giving presentations and trying to kind of roll. But Europe is different, and I think John can explain a bit more about that. They are ahead.
Yeah, so the picture in Europe is patchy. There are certain countries that have a lot of information. And Spain in particular there's a lot of information, a lot of parent support groups, a lot of therapists, a lot of psychologists, all offering services around NVLD. Italy, there's a bit more as well, a certain amount in France, but not that much. One of there is a therapist who we work with a little bit in Switzerland called Pierre Zwicky, who is very active in this area, but it's a pretty patchy story, really. And this is why we want to expand the awareness as much as possible, because really it's people go, you say NVLD and they go, what? And you've got no idea. But yeah, I think it will come, and obviously the DSM inclusion will really help that, because the DSM is really regarded as the sort of Bible of the whole thing in Europe as well. There is also another directory run by the World Health Organization, but which I guess will also include it. But the DSM does seem to sort of set the tone and set the standard for all of these things. So I think that will legitimize it and mean that people actually have to find out about it, because it's a new thing. So we are preparing materials for that. So when it does happen and people go, what the hell? Then we could say, well, here, this is this is how it works. So yeah, it's something that we are working on at the moment, and also we are working on screening and how we can get easier access to diagnostic services, because that is a problem, as I believe it's easier, but it's still an issue in the US and quite expensive.
Expensive, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so if it would be great to be able to kind of resolve that, to facilitate and make those processes easier, so it can open the door to people realizing what's going, because a lot of progress in our coaching comes from simple validation, from being able to say to people, this is what is going on with you, this is what is happening in your head, and this is why these things are happening. So people, as Catherine said before, suddenly, oh my God, this is what it, oh right, okay, it has a name, it is a thing. I'm not, stupid, lazy, mad, whatever.
Yeah. And that's a lot of,
I think the other, sorry.
no, you're fine.
I think the other thing that is hugely kind of, as John said, validating, but is also to realize that having NVLD or even ADHD, there's nothing wrong with you. It's, I mean, the word disorder is, I personally think I'm the most ordered person on the planet. There's nothing, no disorder going on here. So it's when people come and we can tell you a little bit about, I mean, one of the things that we do, I don't know if it's a good time now, but it is we run revision camps. And it started because I said to a mother one day, the mother of a client, and it's about who was 16, and said, oh, would this child like to come to revision club? And the mother said, what's that? And I suddenly had to think, what is that? Because I didn't know, it just came out of my mouth. And it was actually come around to where we practice and happen to live as well. And you can learn in a different way. So if you need to lie on the sofa or on the floor or take breaks, or we cook a lot of sausages through the day, but everybody is neurodivergent. They're all bright, but 95% of them have been bright. They all wanted to be different, but they're diagnosed with ADHD, but we think quite a couple of them, few of them definitely are NVLD as well. And we have exams in this country called GCSEs. So that's what you do, those at about 16. And they all came in with very bad grades or very challenging grades. And when we got the results, we were over the moon because they were all right up there with A's. And it was just fantastic. And they're all back now for their last lot of exams now. So the A levels. I mean, we've got a new crop coming through as well. And it's being got. They're not different. They're not weird. They are just people, but they're exciting people, and they're people who want it to be different, but they don't know how to do it. And I think that's so much of what we deal with. And socially, we deal with a lot of young adults who just are off whack socially. And so that's where the groups help a lot. And that's where coming here and coming to us and working empathetically is being got. One is got. And I think that is one of the biggest reliefs to our clients. Is
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Just having that understanding and validation, and then working with those who truly know what they're going through and understand, the process to get to where they are. And I think what I was going to say earlier too, is that's what we hear a lot from our parents. So we have on our website where people can kind of share their story and write a blog. And a lot of what we hear from parents and adults is, I feel so relieved, if that's the right word,
It
relieved to
is
have a
absolutely.
diagnosis and know that this is not just something that I feel or that I feel in my head.
No,
It's a very valid diagnosis.
it is. Well, yeah. And when it becomes a real diagnosis, it's going to be even more exciting because, I mean, the day I found out, and I know this sounds really weird, but the day I found out that I wasn't stupid, and I was in my mid-40s, it was like somebody switched the lights on. I mean, it was almost, like my life started again. It was truly kind of epiphany. It was an epiphanizing moment. And up until then, I struggled even with relationships. And it was after that I met John, and, we're not together and doing this thing. And so I didn't think I was capable of having a relationship. And yet nobody had ever been able to tell me what was so-called wrong with me. It was just try harder. You can do it. What's wrong with you? Get on with it. So it was a combination of kind of being gaslighting myself, and then also just not knowing how to do it. And it was truly the most exciting thing. And there was a little bit of me that thought, okay, I've wasted and I remember saying to my sister, could I have been a lawyer, doctor, the kind of professions a lot of my friends went into? And she said, absolutely, but you would have had to have learned in a different way. And I made a very conscious decision that day not to dwell on what could have been, and to just say, this is fine. I'm just going to forge forward and do whatever I can. And this is my career, and it will be my career until the day I die.
Yeah. Well, and it's led you on this path of helping others too now. So
Yeah.
just as important as a doctor, you're now helping spread awareness and helping validate these other individuals that are being diagnosed, and you're helping them learn how to kind of navigate through all of it. And I think that's really important work as well.
It's very important. And we have a mantra in our practice, which says you can use neurodivergence as a reason, but not as an excuse. So it's I'm always late for work. It's my ADHD. Well, that's an excuse. There's nothing we can do about it. We can all just sit and look at each other and say, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. But if you say, I struggle to get to work on time, I think it's my ADHD and time blindness, can we work on some strategies? Then you've got a reason, and there's a lot of kind of fluidity around it, and we can help you. And so that is one of the few rules that we run in our practice. I think that's right, John.
That's
Yeah,
a great
yeah.
segue into tell us what you guys do at Refocus. And we've talked a little bit about some of the groups, but we've got people from the UK here. So tell them what you offer and how you can help, and kind of who you're working with as well, adults, children, adolescents. Kind of give us the rundown.
We work with adolescents, normally from about 15 upwards, and the oldest person I think we've had is about 65. So we've covered the full range. I like to look at it in that we do the coaching in 4 ways. First of all, we help people to recognize what their challenges are, what negative patterns of behavior are affecting their life. Once they've got some idea of what's going on, we then help them to develop strategies and tools that they can draw on to help combat those challenges. And a third and an important element of that is devising a kind of introducing structure. Often the NVLD person, the ADHD person, is resistant to structure, but actually it is very, very helpful for them. And the key is to find ways that they can accept structure into their lives and make structure work for them. Because it's very easy to draw up the most fantastic timetable, but often if you haven't bought into it, you do it once and put it in a drawer and never look at it again. So the making structure stick is very, very important. And the fourth element that we do is helping people to discover the benefits of their neurodivergence. Once they realize, this really helps, this creative problem solving, pattern recognition, this ability to really focus on something. There's a whole host of benefits. And once people recognize what those are, they can kind of lean into them and recruit them to help them overcome the challenges of the condition. And that helps then how they approach their life, because they're approaching their life not from behind and struggling. It's kind of, well, this is what I'm good at. This is what I'm going to do. And so it's a kind of strengths-led approach rather than being on the back foot the whole time. Because as we've been saying, often the education system is set up for the neurotypical, and it often poorly serves the neurodivergent. So people end up with a whole range. Not only they don't learn very much, but they end up with various anxieties and depressions and stresses and thinking and real psychological difficulties that they have to overcome. So reversing that and making them view it as a strength, superpower is also really important.
I think another thing that we see kind of over and over is the erosion of confidence. And I think that is such that somebody can come in who's clearly bright, clearly capable, wants it to be different. But it's that erosion of who am I? And that is something that I tend to be, because John is more on the executive side and I tend to deal more with the relationship side, and also just how different relationships are when you are neurodivergent. You're just operating at a different speed, in a different gear, thinking different things, overthinking almost everything. And if you've got a nice mix of NVLD and ADHD, then it's a double whack of overthinking. And so it's also unpicking that, not trying to be the therapist, but just trying to help people live their lives without stumbling 10 times a day. And there's a lot of material that, I'm NVLD every single day. It doesn't, there's no cure because there's nothing wrong with it. But so it's also living the live show. I mean, John lives the live show by living with me, but also them coming here and being able to, I mean, I don't obviously talk about myself very much, but they can see how I am. And so they actually are seeing that it can be different, that you really can turn your life around. So I'm not saying I'm a sort of beacon of hope, but it definitely is. There's a positivity around the work we do, and that you can find confidence, and you can make it different.
So you're muted, I think.
Sorry. I mute myself when I'm not talking just in case the dogs start barking. But do you guys only offer services in person, or do you offer virtual? Kind of what is that set up for you?
We do offer some virtual, but we prefer to work in real life because obviously, especially with the ADHD and Zoom are not massively good friends, really. So we find that we get a lot more done in person, but it's not always practical. What we sometimes do is try to at least do the first session in person to establish a bit of a rapport, to establish a connection, and then move to virtual. But if it has to be virtual, that's better than nothing. But we do prefer to work in real life, and we're based right in the middle of London, in the kind of in Marylebone, which is like the medical district of London. So it's pretty easy for people to get to, and you're very central, or we're very central.
So we work with quite a few university students, and obviously they're not all in London. So, but we try and get them. So we'll do Zoom, but then when they can, if they're London based or in the holidays or something, that even if it's not exam season, they'll come and see us, just so we can keep that personal connection going. And then we spend a bit of time every year in South Africa. So obviously we're on Zoom then, but I would say it's about 85-15, but we will work on, and there are a couple of clients who we've started on Zoom and it works really well. And when we've met them in person, it's been seamless. So, and the younger generation are better on Zoom than the older ones, by and large.
Very cool. Great. So if you are based in London, and you're watching this, welcome to Refocus. They can, we'll share their website and their information in the comments as well, so that everybody can kind of gain access to that, to learn just a little bit more about your coaches and what you're doing and services you offer and stuff. One service that you touched on earlier, John, but not just now, that I want to dig into and kind of was what I'm really excited to talk about today, is your corporate services. This isn't something that we have seen offered in the US a lot, from any of and I come from a educational software sales background, so I actually worked with a lot of coaches in the UK with my UK-based company that I was with. And you are correct. A lot of them don't know about and aren't focused on neurodivergence. And I think it's really great work that you're doing. I haven't seen it here in the US either. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the corporate world, which will then lead us into the power of NVLD in the workforce.
Yes, what we're doing is really bringing home to companies that they are really missing a trick by not taking care of people with neurodivergence and actively recruiting people with neurodivergence, because it helps the people that do that are more creative and more agile in their marketplaces because they're able to think more creatively about their offerings and about the services they provide and how to do the things that they do. So it's very much about telling or showing companies that accommodations for neurodivergence are not expensive and you get back far more than you spend on accommodations. And there's been research on this matter. There was a big worldwide kind of survey of adjustments or accommodations for in this particular case for ADHD. And it was very, very clear that the adjustments cost a fraction of the increase in productivity. So we are really working with them to, first of all, realize that this is something they should do and focus on, and then how do they adjust their recruitment processes to make them more neurodivergent friendly, so that because a lot of recruitment is based on kind of often quite, for a neurodivergent person, quite antagonistic or confrontational one-to-one interviews, which people struggle with sometimes, especially people with autism. So, and people being called to these interviews can be very disconcerting for them. So it's about finding ways to improve the recruitment or expand the recruitment process, then of how to accommodate the people, neurodivergent people within the workplace. So there is some sort of procedure that whereby they don't feel bad about asking for adjustments and accommodations, and that also their co-workers know what's going on, because often there's a kind of gulf in understanding, and neurodivergent people or the neurotypical is often puzzled by neurodivergent behavior and thinks that the person is making some sort of behavioral choice, that they are choosing to interrupt, to speak impulsively, or to be kind of often late with their work or various other. But if a tiny bit of understanding so that the colleagues can realize, actually, this person isn't doing this deliberately to be annoying. This is just the way they think differently. And it helps promote kind of harmony within teams and within the organization, just a little bit of an understanding within the organization. So that is something we work on, kind of awareness seminars and training seminars for not only HR people, but for managers and team members, so that they realize, actually, this person needs to do their job in this particular way. They're very, very good at doing their job in this way. And if they're left to get on with it, all things will generally be well. But so it's really about facilitating the kind of full expression of neurodivergence in the workplace. And there are certain industries that attract more neurodivergent people than others. For example, hospitality business attracts a lot of people with ADHD because they're smart, they don't do very well at school, so they come out with not many qualifications. They end up working in a bar or a club or a restaurant, just casual work, and they're smart, so they progress within it and become managers within it. But then, because their ADHD hasn't really often been managed, work-life balance issues come in, kind of in team relationship issues come in. So that can be enormously disruptive. Likewise, we work with cybersecurity companies, employ a lot of people with autism, different set of issues. NVLD is not really on the horizon at the moment for these companies. It's really about getting them to embrace the idea of neurodivergence in general, rather than any particular one bit of it. So yeah, that's kind of the approach we're taking.
Cool. Catherine, did you want to add anything to that?
I think, again, I think that it's also getting ahead in corporate, but also getting along. And so, the getting along challenges are nuanced, but as can be as extreme. The ADHD person can be very annoying and interrupt, or the NVLD person talking away, but are not actually, missing the signs. And I think that the more NVLD is known, I think that the more challenges will come out in the workplace with people, because obviously there's going to be so many adults who are not diagnosed. And I think missing the signs is such a huge component in the workforce. And we see it over and over with, I mean, we had an example with a client who read an email where they were just being asked to give somebody's name, and they wrote an entire sort of huge explanation, and then went off on a tangent and made a complaint about somebody else altogether. And it was just like, really, this was just a simple yes or no. And so it was, and that's just NVLD on steroids. So that's the kind of thing that I don't think is, and people say, oh, that's my ADHD. And we don't believe, I mean, in the NVLD word, the difference, but I think that it's those kind of things with NVLD are really going to come out in the corporate more than, I think, in a funny way, more than ADHD.
Well, and I think too, because so much is known about autism and ADHD, and it is, such a common thing to hear that people have, people are more understanding. Well, I'll go ahead and say it. They're kind of more understanding and more patient with it versus something they've never heard of and don't know anything about, because they just, again, don't have that knowledge. And so I think that the work is important. And like you said, John, too, just the overall neurodivergence, not a specific diagnosis necessarily, but learning how to accommodate and work with all the different types of neurodiversity that are out there is so important for organizations. I will say here, one of the things we see a lot, and I've seen it with our ambassadors, and a lot of the adults that have contacted us, is that they go into a field to help others like themselves. So like yourself, Catherine, you went into coaching. We get a lot of therapists, social workers, coaches, teachers. A lot of people with NVLD kind of go into those fields because they did feel so alone or so unacknowledged as children that they want other people to not feel that way. And so they go into these fields and these industries to change that and to really be the people at the forefront of, this kind of shift in acceptance and awareness and understanding of NVLD. And I think that's a really cool thing as well, that you're using kind of your lived experience to then go and make sure that no one else has to deal with that and really help change the world in that way.
Yeah, and it kind of removes the fear of it, because there is nothing to be fearful of. And I think that a lot of people, particularly with NVLD, there is a lot of, you live always second guessing. What did I say? Because I describe it as going, if you are short-sighted and you go to the cinema without your glasses, and you're gonna miss a lot.
Yeah.
And that's what NVLD is like. You are missing so much of that nonverbal communication that you are, it can make you really frightened, because you never know what people are thinking, you never know what their reactions are and things. And I think that that's a huge challenge, and it can be taught, even though I would think probably, I don't know, John, a few times a day something blindsides me, and I have a little NVLD zap. And it's just, yeah, I mean, obviously I can recognize it and it helps, but I still get caught. So it's just that constant awareness and constant managing of it. But it's a difficult, and what, in our work and understanding, and obviously we've known about it for a long time, but it's a difficult thing to describe because of the visuospatial and that it's not dyspraxia, and describing the difference between NVLD and dyspraxia is hard. I mean, that is, maybe knitting in the dark. You can with NVLD, you can't with dyspraxia is a good enough example, provided you can knit in the first place. So it's it's a it is quite a difficult one to get across, but I think people will be open to it. Well, we hope people will in this country, all over. We just need it in the DSM now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on something because we always like to kind of end before we start our Q&A session. It looks like we do have a couple questions, but I always like to end with advice and kind of positive. And John, you mentioned that kind of like strengths focused approach to everything. And I wanted to just ask, what do you think are the biggest strengths that individuals with NVLD can bring into their job in the workforce? So I think we get that question actually quite a bit. Besides, what job should I, go into, or what industry, we get that question, but also just, how can they focus on those strengths, and what strengths do you think are most important that hiring individuals with NVLD would be for a company?
I think one of the greatest strengths is this ability to look at a problem in a different way, because they literally think differently. Their approach, their whole analysis, their whole way of dealing with a problem is very different to the neurotypical, and that can be enormously valuable, because it means that you get literally a diversity of thought about your business issues, your business challenges. It really, if you keep doing the same thing that you've always done for the past 20 years, you're going to keep getting the same results and probably actually get worse because the world moves on. But actually, what you want is a whole range of different ways of thinking about stuff. And NVLD, ADHD, autism, they all bring different ways of thinking about business issues. And if you can harness that, you're going to be one step ahead of the next guy, because you are literally seeing things differently and seeing things that they haven't noticed.
Catherine, what would you say would be one of the biggest strengths for the workforce?
I think John's right. I think
Yeah.
it is seeing things differently. And I think for me, I think that it's also, and the people who I obviously can only predict have NVLD, I think it's resilience. And particularly once they know, and once they're working on it, before then it can go a little bit haywire because that erosion of confidence. But I think it is that resilience, that they will look at things differently, and they really will, just doggedly carry on.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, weirdly, I think that particularly with ADHD and well, with NVLD, it's being able to talk. And I think that, and not being afraid to ask questions, but I mean, it also can get very annoying, just that incessant question asking. But I think it's also just, it's doggedly trying to get to the root of the problem and then do it in a different way. I think that is a big strength.
I love both of those answers. I think they're both really good. And I
And
think,
humor, and actually humor, weirdly, humor is, sorry, I was just,
oh, you're good.
because I think that when you know what it is, and I think that there are, yes, people mask by being the class clown or the company clown or whatever it is, but it's not self-effacing humor. It's just sometimes when it's been a bit more challenging, that you can see things differently, and therefore you can see the funny side. So there's a kind of irreverence about it, which has a refreshing appeal. It also can be a bit inappropriate, but we won't go there. But
I
because
think that plays into the resilience too, though. Like having the
yes,
ability to see that as humor kind of comes from that experience of having to be so resilient and really push through and work hard and that kind of thing. So
yeah,
I love
exactly.
both of those. We do have some questions. We've had quite a few people on today. Normally we only have, about 10 people watching live, and today we've had anywhere up to 25. So we've got people from all over, New York, New Jersey, the UK. And then we've got somebody from Northern Ireland. They said they'll be contacting you soon, because as you guys said, there's next to nothing known there. So be expecting a call from Ireland or contact there. I have a question from someone who is asking about comorbidity with autism and NVLD, and I'm not sure if you guys work too much with people with autism. But do you have recommendations to build confidence for those who suffer from both? So even if you don't have much experience in working with, those that are on the spectrum, what advice would you give for just building confidence in general with neurodivergence?
I think the reassurance that again, there's nothing wrong with you, and
Yeah.
then also learning. I mean, we do work with people who have high functioning autism. At one point, people thought that NVLD was the kind of on the order, but we now know that obviously that's not the case. But I think that it's learning strategies that help you navigate your life. I think that really is one of the biggest pieces of advice we could offer. Because once you learn those strategies, and then also trying to find a profession or a life or a job that fits your brain wiring, because there's no point in working in the circus, or if you don't like a lot of noise or whatever. But it's just so trying to, if possible, to try and get to find the profession that fits how your brain is wired.
Absolutely. That's really good advice.
There's that guy Tony Atwood in Australia. He does a lot of seminars on autism, and he's written great books and things. And he actually talks quite a lot about NVLD, which I was cock-a-hoop excited when, but that's Australia. So, but he knows about NVLD, and so he weaves those in quite comfortably,
Okay,
and the comorbidities.
amazing. Have a question from someone asking about the examples of types of nonverbal communications that one might miss.
Shall I do that again? Sorry, John. Oh, John?
Yeah. So these are things like facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, that kind of thing, and also that sense of being able to read the room, being able to get a sense of what's going on among a group of people, whether there is tension among them, whether they're relaxed, whether they're kind of busily engaged on some project of theirs and don't want to be interrupted, or whether they're more open to outsiders. It's that kind of thing. It's those intangible senses really that often get compromised with NVLD, and can mean that people say inappropriate things or miss the tone of a gathering, and
Yeah.
There's
so
another. I had a great example today, actually, with a client who I'm sure is. I don't think she's ADHD at all. I think she's nonverbal, and she works in a vintage fashion shop. And a client said, "Well, just put the clothes in the bag," which she did. And the client was furious because she didn't wrap them up in tissue paper. Right? She was just told to put them in the bag. And she took it literally. So she missed the kind of the nonverbal cue of, well, put it in the, wrap them up. So it is also it's nonverbal, as we know, people they need the recipe. It's not prepare the vegetables. Well, are we preparing them for dinner, for war? I mean, what are we preparing them for? So and what do you want me to do with the potatoes? Chop them or boil them? So it's not because we're stupid. It's just, please be clear in your communication. I think that, and so it's teaching people to ask, the people who are communicating with them, to be clear. If you don't understand their facial expression, ask, what do you mean by that? I think
Absolutely.
that is a lot of the nonverbal stuff. I hope
Yeah.
that answers the question.
Yeah, and Kevin, there's also more information on our website because I will say, these are vague categories, facial expressions, body language. We're not, being very specific, but that's because everyone is different. And we like to say that NVLD is its own spectrum, and that if you've met one person with NVLD, you've met one person with NVLD. So everyone has different things that they struggle with and different things that they really excel at. So Kevin, if you look on our website, there's a little bit more kind of in-depth details, but I will say we have an ambassador that's a comedian. He is a stand-up comedian. He does shows around the US. He clearly kind of understands how to read some of that nonverbal language from his audience. But then we have other ambassadors and other adults and people we've talked to who talk about how difficult it is to understand idioms. And so I think, again, that just really points to the fact that everyone is different, and that there are certain things that one person may struggle with that another may not, because everyone is so unique, and kind of how their NBLD comes out. But I just wanted to let you know that we had some of that on our website. We've got two more questions. One is, how do you coach people to read rooms? Or how to get them to stop, how to get ourselves to stop talking. So how do you kind of read the room and understand, like, maybe now is the time to listen instead of talk, or something like that? Do you have a technique for how you coach that?
I think it goes back to what you were saying before, that everybody is different. You would help the comedian in a different way to helping, and also age. I mean, but if we're just talking about adults in the world, I think it's about giving them cues to stop and listen, and to be curious, but not to ask incessant questions, and also to mirror perhaps the other person, and so to not be too intrusive, but not be too vague. And then to read the room is also to look. I mean, it's a difficult question because it's so non-specific, but it is. I think it's, don't be the last to leave the party would be, I mean, a very kind of broad brush. Or if you are asking the most questions, maybe you let somebody else get in. That kind of thing. I think, I mean, I would imagine John has more other things.
One helpful thing can be to find a mechanism whereby you interrupt the impulse to say something. So if you can, it can be as simple as, okay, before I speak, I'm going to take one breath in. So you don't just launch in, and that often gives you that 1 or 2 seconds is enough time for your brain to kind of catch up and say, actually, is this a sensible thing to be saying right now? Do people want to hear this right now? Or should I just listen? So if you can find some way of, as I say, interrupting the impulse, that can be very helpful.
Yeah.
And maybe also, in terms of reading the room, asking yourself questions. Well, what can I establish? What the sense of, what do I know about what is going on in the room at the moment? What information do I have, rather than just sort of leaping into it? Is really reviewing as much as possible as what you do know, and then working from there, rather than just not paying any attention.
And also, kind of paradoxically, also that if you don't understand something, discreetly asking, what do you mean by that? Rather than jumping to major conclusions and then diving in on some tangent. So if you take the example of I mean, this was by email, but this particular person does do it verbally as well, of not just jumping to immediate conclusions, and really teaching people to listen to what's going on. And then, as John said, pause, and then saying, could you explain yourself? I didn't understand what you meant by that, rather than just presuming. Because I think that sometimes there is presumption, And I think that the CBT model, that is obviously used as a treatment, but working out, just analyzing your thoughts and not letting your emotions run away with you, I think is also, and teaching people to be able to do that in the moment, which is hard, but it is possible.
Yeah. And we
And
hosted,
also,
oh, go ahead.
sometimes, where possible, allowing people to just step back and process things and work out, hang on, is this logical, or is 5 + 5 17 in it?
Yeah. And so we had a Facebook Live with some of our ambassadors. It was a couple years ago, I think, if I'm thinking of the right one, and kind of came across this same, we were talking about friendships and relationships. We kind of came across this same topic. And I know you're always in different rooms and there may be different people, but if you're with somebody that you're very close to, whether it's a friend or a partner, and maybe having like some kind of signal or something to kind of say, if tell them that, kind of have that safe signal or safe word, and use those people that are close to you and understand you and that you feel comfortable with and really safe with to help you navigate those situations as well. I think that that's a good strategy. It doesn't work in every situation because they're not always going to be with you. But that was one of the things that our ambassadors kind of talked about, was how they relied on those that they felt really safe and secure around. So,
And or if that's a really good thing, and if that person is not available, also being able to talk about it afterwards to people.
yeah.
And to either with a coach, a therapist, or even a friend, just to say, just what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, our last question came by email, and I believe that this person is located in the UK. So I'm going to read it. They find their NVLD to be problematic at work. Their colleagues are great lateral thinking, good with abstractions and inferential reasoning. They can also plan ahead and foresee problems. All of these qualities are useful in whatever field this is. His requests for additional time and information are met willingly, but is objectively slower and less capable than his peers. What would you propose? I think we kind of a little bit talked about this earlier, but do you have specific advice or something that you would recommend? I mean, it says that his requests for accommodations are met willingly. But I think maybe, and this may come a little bit from confidence as well. If the company's helping you and they're willing to work with you, I think maybe that's a little bit of just a confidence issue, maybe. Or how do you guys see this situation, and what would you suggest?
I missed the last bit. What was the issue?
So just what would you propose? The qualities of like lateral thinking and planning ahead and foreseeing problems are all really useful in this field. And this person's requests for additional time and information are granted and met willingly, but I am objectively slower and less capable than my peers. Again, it kind of sounds just like a confidence issue
Yeah.
of understanding, like Catherine, going back to you talking about the gap, being confident in that gap and focusing on the other strengths that you might bring, which would be that diverse way of thinking and thinking of other ways to see the problem and situation.
And the
Yeah.
verbal ability, I think, to really concentrate on the verbal ability, and maybe, it's a difficult question to answer out of context, but also
Yeah.
to look at your strengths and because maybe you're slower or seemingly slower, but actually it could be that you're just seeing a bigger picture, and bigger pictures are, there's more to see. So
Yeah. Are you slower at writing it, but not at speaking it? Maybe chances are you're really good at speaking it quite quickly, but struggle to write it in a report. So there must be things that you are really good at and better than your colleagues. And I think it's really drilling into those and using those and being upfront about it and saying, look, this is what I'm good at. I'd like to do it like this. I don't want to write a report. I'd like to give you an oral presentation or whatever it is, just
Yeah.
to
or
really,
working with somebody, so you kind of doubling
yeah,
up.
exactly.
And yeah, and being sometimes working with somebody whose verbal ability isn't as good, so you're able to kind of dovetail in together. That can also make a big difference.
Absolutely. Very cool. I typed a
But
couple.
confidence is huge. Confidence is and the other thing is I think comparisons are other people are better by what standard of it. That comparisons might not be relevant or might not be helpful in this case.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. We're at an hour, so we're gonna go ahead and kind of end it here. Can't believe we talked for an hour, but that's really good. There was so much good information. If we did not get to your question or comment, I will collect those and send them over to John and Catherine in an email or answer them myself if I feel comfortable with that. But I just wanted to say thank you both so much for reaching out to us and creating this partnership. I'm really excited to work together, in the future and kind of coming up with ways that we can help each other and really help spread awareness around the world and not just the US. And I want to thank you both for sharing your personal story, Catherine, and kind of your expertise in this field to both of you. I think this has been really beneficial, and you are our first international guest, which is very exciting. We have worked with the TANV out of Spain, but have not had them on for Facebook Live. I think Laura spoke at one of their functions. That's the parent group in Spain. And so I am very excited to see what the future holds. And thank you both again for taking the time out of your evenings to join us for our post-lunch Facebook Live with the NVLD project. So